is I caught pneumonia, I guess, either that night, maybe I left the window open. Who knows what led to it? But what ended up happening was, is I remember waking up from a really crazy dream. But the only thing that I really remember from the dream is that I was falling. Um, and then I remember getting up and I walked down the hallway to my parents' bedroom. And evidently, as I was trying to explain to my mother what had happened in the dream, she thought that I was speaking gibberish, basically. And so what she did is she put her hand on my head, and then she freaked out because she said I was burning up. And then I think she went and got a thermometer. By that point, she was also, she had given me the thermometer, checked it, called the hospital. And at this point, they had told my mother either I was not going to make it if they tried to drive me to the hospital, or I wasn't going to make it if the ambulance came. I don't know which happened because I really to this day don't even know how I got to the hospital. Um, but I do know that I was taken down the hallway by my dad. He put me into a bathtub, and then started running cold water. And I remember asking my dad why he was running cold water, and he wouldn't really answer. He just kept saying, "Oh, it's okay. You're going to be all right. Don't worry about it," that sort of thing. And I remember hearing my mother also talking in the kitchen, and I could hear the ice being poured into buckets, right? And so I'm in the bathroom at this point. Dad is kind of pushing me down, and my mom comes in and she starts handing him the buckets, and he's just dumping buckets of ice in. And so at this particular point, I remember feeling my arms and I don't remember much about my legs, but I do remember that my arms and my chest felt like they were going completely numb, but it wasn't the type of numb where you don't feel anything. It's the type of numb where it's a cold, dead. You can feel your circulation slowing down. You can feel you're losing the ability to use your hands, your arms. Everything is kind of like dying, right? And it was just this bitter cold. And um, I remember my vision started getting weird. I started seeing spots or geometric shapes, and then it went down to a fine tunnel point. So I was experiencing tunnel vision, and she just kept bringing the stuff in and or the ice in, and he kept just dumping the ice in on me. And I remember at some point I started really trying to kick. I started trying to get out of it. I started thrashing around and everything, but Dad just pushed me down kind of further. And then it was like one of those old tube television sets. Like when you shut it off, it boom goes off, and then you see a little point, and that's exactly what I saw. So I went out like a light. I remember going into complete blackness, or many people would call it the void. I was maybe conscious there for a couple of seconds, maybe more, but that's the thing with time. If in a dream, sometimes you can live hours upon hours upon hours, maybe even days in a dream that it only takes a couple of hours for you to sleep through. In this particular case, God knows how long I was actually there, but I do remember going into that black, and I do remember knowing that that's where I was at. There were no angels, there were no demons, there were no dead relatives, there was none of that. And for all the people out there who may be Christian and whatnot, I'm sorry, but I can't validate or verify something that didn't happen. So I'm just going to say that it was complete blackness. I would figure that if there were angels, if there were demons, me being around 5 years old at that time, that would have been probably the time for me to see the angels or demons, because I'd be at the most innocent point of my life. But none of that happened. And I remember waking up at one point. I still don't even remember the ride home when I think about it, but I remember waking up, and then one of the nurses or somebody said, "Oh, we almost lost you." And then I remember the surgeon or the doctor, whoever was in the room with me, he said, "Oh, we actually technically did for about 4 some minutes or something like that, just under 5 minutes." And so that was kind of the situation that brought on that near death experience. I mean, I was technically dead. So, I mean, I was dead straight up. Um, so I don't know. a lot of near death experiences are people, I guess, that almost got there or they didn't quite make it to that point, but I had completely crossed over and I saw nothing but blackness. So, but that's not to say that I didn't have side effects after that fact. So,
So tell me about those side effects, because you have this experience that seems to be very almost like neutral, right? It doesn't open you up to anything. There's no particular feeling. What I hear very often is there's this overwhelming feeling of love. And for you, it was just super neutral, nothing in particular. So you come back and you remember it. But does anything sort of change for you after this experience?
yes, I can say that I did experience, like before that, I had a few, call it paranormal experiences. Um, and what ended up happening after this situation is that it seemed to accelerate the stuff that I was experiencing. So, I got to the point where I became highly sensitive to, you want to call it spirits or energies or that sort of thing. But I started really being able to sense things a lot better. And like I said, before that, I did have a few paranormal experiences. You call it sleep paralysis or something, that by your bedside and whatnot. But this started really amplifying itself. So I started being able to go into places and I could experience, you know, either spirits. I could also experience sometimes, and this was very rare at that time, but hearing the thoughts of others as they were passing by me. Um, there were a lot of things that I kind of started picking up on. The funny thing though is right after that, because even though I was experiencing this rise in paranormal activity, right around puberty, it kind of started dropping down again. So like when I started experiencing, the idea of that I wanted to be with girls or socialization in school. All those things kind of took my attention away from anything paranormal. And then I started living a very average life again until my 20s. But the thing is right up until about age 12, I would say from, like I said, 5-year-olds to age 12, the sleeping paralysis stuff got to be a lot more. I had many experiences being able to sense what we would call probably negative intelligences or demonic intelligences. I had a few experiences with positive or angelic beings, but right during the onset of puberty, that's when it took a nosedive. And then in my 20s, everything kind of picked up again. And it picked up because I started kind of getting into dark stuff at that time. So I was starting to learn how to meditate, but I was meditating trying to learn how to enter people's dreams or trying to contact and call out to animals that were in my vicinity, but doing it with my mind. Um, and I started getting extremely proficient at that for a while. And I would kind of test it on my girlfriend at the time. Her name was Jessica. And she got to the point where she was getting kind of tired of it because I was doing it nightly. So it was one of those things where, and I'm sure it was kind of creepy. She gave me permission at first, but when you're kind of sitting there and staring at a person as they're going to sleep, so you can, kind of get into their heads, I'm sure that kind of was offsetting to her for a little bit. And I ended up having an experience that showed me that I was going the negative route at that point, which I ended up cutting that off and stopped doing it. But it was actually an experience with her. And do you want to hear that experience?
I
Okay.
do, yeah.
Okay. So this happened on one of the nights, and we were starting to get into kind of a volatile relationship, not volatile in terms of physical, but psychological. We just weren't getting along with each other, and I was still trying to do that same thing. I was still trying to go into her head, and on this particular day, we had gotten into an argument, and we went to bed together that night, and I was kind of doing my thing, which I was kind of staring at her for a little bit, and then I rolled over, and then I would kind of lay flat on my back, and then that's where I begin my process of meditation to try to enter the sleep state. And in this particular case, something got mixed up or something got messed up in between my connection between her and I. And all of a sudden, the connection is broken, and she gets up on top of me and starts to simulate, well, not simulate. I mean, she was doing the sex act. She kind of pulled my pants down and everything. And then as soon as she got on top and everything, she looked at me directly and then climbed right back off of me and went to sleep. And I was like, well, that's odd. So I reach over and I'm like, hey, what was that about? And she wakes up, looks at me, and she goes, what was what about? And I was like, you literally just climbed up on top of me, started having sex, and then you climbed off of me and as if it never happened. And she goes, yeah, that didn't happen. Go back to sleep. So this happens two more times. Same process, same everything. The third, or I think it was the fourth time that she did it, um, I then, as she got on top of me, I grabbed her and I was like, what is it that you're doing? So I knocked it off and I said, you evil bitch, which I should not have said, but I said anyway. And then she looks at me, and I swear her eyes changed a different color. It went to green, like a deep green. And then she says, I'm not the one who's evil. And then that's what pulled me out of that whole thing. And what was interesting was it was seamless. When I pulled out of that, she was right back on her side. She was not sitting on top of me. And at that point, I was trying to figure out what happened. So I ended up going into my bathroom, looked into the mirror. I was trying to wake myself up because obviously I thought there was some sort of a possible sleep paralysis episode there, even though I didn't experience any paralysis. And that was when I got a glimpse in the mirror and I just saw something move, and then the door slammed right behind it. And I knew Jessica was in the other room sleeping. So at that particular point, something had been messing with me. And I knew that the fact that she said, I'm not the one who's evil, which she's pointing the finger at me, going, You're the one." And so at that point, I realized that I was playing with stuff that I probably shouldn't have been playing with, and then I kind of let it go after that point. But yeah, that caused a lot of rifts between her and I at that time, and we ended up breaking up probably a couple months after that. Completely broke up. So
Do you reckon, the fact that you were able to sort of get into her head while she was sleeping, do you reckon that was what you were doing, or was there something else sort of like helping you? So acknowledging your intent and then sort of like giving you what you wanted.
the access. I would have to say that that's probably precisely what was going on. Um, Now, I do have, I teach a lot of stuff now, and I do have the ability to do roughly the same thing, but now it's more in regards to helping people. But at that time, given the fact that it was completely negatively polarized, completely negatively charged, I do believe that something else was giving me that access and allowing me to go into that person's state of mind, or, their dream state. And the thing is these were very specific things. So I would tell Jessica, okay, I'm going to do such and such thing. See if you remember this when you wake up, yada, yada, blah, blah. And we would get perfect alignments every single time. And I do believe that after I experienced the entity that was in the bathroom, that shut the door. I mean, it takes a lot of power for an entity to manifest and then literally grab something physical and shut a door. So I had to have been feeding it my energy as well as her energy, in order for it to empower itself that much. And yeah, I'm in agreement with you that it was definitely something that was that I was receiving help.
So I don't know if you expect that question, but if anybody is in a situation like that, I mean, it sounds that the relationship between you and Jessica was very much, you were aligned and you were sharing with her what you were planning on and she was in agreement. But say somebody is not in agreement and the other person is just trying to sort of make their way into somebody else's mind, how would you go about protecting yourself from that? Is there a way that you could do that?
Sure. Number one, I want to let it be known that it's completely vampiric by nature to try to enter someone else's mind or enter someone else's field of energy without, explicit permission. And even if you have explicit permission, it's still an invasion of their body, their mind, their soul. Okay, so um, you know, to answer that question, repeat it one more time. I want to make sure I get the points that I want to say here.
Yeah, so in the case that you wouldn't have had that permission, but you wanted to go ahead anyway, how could she have protected herself from that?
Okay, so free will is everything where this place is concerned. And if she decides to say it is my free will, and that's all there is to it, you say it's my free will to remain, completely autonomous and to be unfazed or untouched, then nothing can attack you, nothing can enter that field unless you open yourself up to it by giving that permission, giving over your fear, giving over to negative tendencies or negativity in general. Once the fear button gets pushed, that's where you start to relinquish control. So the thing is you have to be fearless in your endeavor. You have to be very willful and basically say, this is my system. You're not allowed to come in or touch. And the thing is once you decide to do something like that, you are your own person and nothing can mess with you unless you allow it. So all it takes really is the will to say it and to know it.
That sounds really powerful. And then one thing that you shared previously was that this entity, whatever it was feeding off your energy and that of Jessica
Yes.
without the two of you realizing it. So is there a way that you could have realized at that point, if you could go back in time and give, younger you advice, was there a way that younger you could have caught on, hold on, there's something happening with my energy, this doesn't seem right?
The younger me was a very headstrong, hard-headed individual. So if I were to go back, even if the younger me knew it was the older me, the younger me would probably still go about that the same way. My advice to my younger self would be, you're playing with darkness, don't mess with it. Turn around, use that same energy to be able to teach and help others. But I do know that my younger self was extremely headstrong. And I did a lot of dumb things when I was younger, not just metaphysically either. Just being young and dumb and running around and doing stuff that I shouldn't have been doing. Um, it's the funny thing is about giving advice is that you can have a blueprint for someone's success or failures right in front of them. You can go, here's your blueprint. This is what you will do. I know this. I know you. And if you do this, here's going to be the response. This is going to be the reaction. This will be the results. And I've done this for so many people, but everyone usually always does what they're going to do anyway, just to test the bounds, the boundaries, and to see if what you say comes true. And what's funny is, no matter how many times you can tell a person something over and over again and be correct over and over again, they will still go their own direction just to test the waters and test the boundaries. So it's really hard. That's one of those things where we go, hindsight's always 2020. Um, but even if you had all of the knowledge in the world that was sitting in front of you, because all of us have a pretty good, I would say, spiritual compass, moral compass. Almost all of us do. It's whether or not we're going to listen to that spiritual or moral compass. Or, look at the blueprint and go, yeah, I know what happens if I do this, but I'm still going to go and do it anyway. And that's the thing that I have found during my process of teaching over, now at this point, I guess it's been 20 years, is that you can educate people on things, but never tell them what to do or what not to do, because the minute that you tell them what to do, they are going to do the exact opposite just to see how it works out.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I wanted to get into another side of the experiences that you've had because you've had an extensive array of experiences with aliens. So walk me through that first encounter. How did you come to encounter one or more alien?
The first encounter happened on May 5th of 2004. Now the thing is I didn't see aliens at that point. What I got was a massive UFO experience. So what ended up happening is I went to a place called Leonard Springs and I was going to meditate there. And like I said, this was May 5th of 2004. So this is when spring is just coming in to play. And so you can hear all these crickets, you can hear all the animals, and even at nighttime, it's pretty loud. And when I went down to go to Leonard Springs and crossed the threshold that takes you down to the spring area, everything went completely dead silent. I have never heard something happen quite like that before, where stillness just happened in a split second. First, you can hear all the crickets, you can hear all the birds, you can hear the insects, and then you take a cross, you just step over a line, and all of a sudden, everything goes dead silent. So it kind of freaked me out. And I sat there and had this inner dialogue whether I was scared or not. And then I just decided, oh, you know what? I'm not actually scared. I'm just going to go to the creek behind my house instead. So I ended up driving back home. There's an area back there called Hines Road, and it leads to a farmer's field. And I drove back there, and looking across the farmer's field, I saw what I was positive was a security light sitting over the guy's home. And I hadn't seen it there before, but the way it was sitting up there, he had so many different types of animals, including llamas and other things. So I was like, yeah, definitely a security light. So I just kind of drove around and parked up by his place because that's where the creek is. And I kept looking at that light, and I was like, man, that's a big bright light. That's so weird. And as I got out of the car, I started walking, and then I noticed that light started moving towards me. And it was completely dead silent. And as many times as I've told this story and as many times as I look back on it, I still don't understand how I didn't see the general size of what I was looking at from either across that field or even when I was right up there. Because when the light came over me, okay, it didn't look any bigger than something that you would see outside on a street, you know what I mean? A street lamp or whatever. It didn't look that much bigger at all. But yet, as this thing comes completely over me, now I'm seeing the massive size of it. It seems like a freaking stadium in the sky. It was a giant egg-shaped craft. It had lights that went around the center of it, these triangular lights that were on the bottom of it, and then one light that was at the top that would glow according to how fast it was moving. And so this thing was up there, sitting silently as it got over me. And then it was at this point that I remember looking around at my surroundings and seeing that there were no lights on. There's no one awake. There's no one home. And I'm out here alone with this thing. And I try to run back to my car. And no can do. The thing froze my ability to run away. So it took away the ability for me to use my arms and the ability for me to use my legs. I was kind of stuck, frozen, looking upward. I remember my mouth kind of draping down. Um, and then I saw probably what you would call a million different flashes, but and it was of images, but I could not focus on any one single image because the stuff was moving too quickly. I then felt what was a buzzing sensation that started right here on my neck, but then it kind of went up to my temples, back down to my neck. And this is about the point that I really started freaking out because I couldn't move my arms, I couldn't move my legs, I can't move on my own volition. I'm staring at this huge mass in the sky, and now I'm having this interaction in my head that I have no control over. And so I was definitely scared, and the situation was pretty harrowing any way you look at it. And I didn't know. The one thing I kept saying to myself was, like, they could come down here and cut me up in a million different ways, put me back together, and there'd be nothing I could do about it. The other aspect of it is in the process of feeling that vibration and what was going on, is I would tell myself to run, but then I would hear the word run echoing in the back of my head. It was like it was pinging back and forth. And then I would say something else in my head like run fast, fast. And I'd hear run, 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 fast, 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 fast. And it would just keep pinging. And every single word that I would add, it would just overlap the others and it became one jarbled mess. So that was also extremely unnerving because now I'm hearing my own voice in my own thoughts pinging in the back of my head. So anyway, after about, I'm guessing 15 minutes because I really don't know. But after about 15 minutes, the thing released me. It starts moving north, east, and then it puts down a red laser and it's moving like this in the air. So it's not like just moving like this. It's tilting itself and turning and then moving as it goes, but it's these smooth movements. It goes behind some trees. I see a bunch of lights spew out. At this point, now I'm in my car and I'm driving back home. And so once I get home, I get inside, um, and I went and grabbed my gun, which was the dumbest thing in the world because this thing just froze up my ability to use my arms and legs. And I think that a gun is going to be, the thing that's going to protect me. And I sit down on the couch, and after about a minute or so of sitting on the couch, I laughed at myself for grabbing the gun because it was just absolutely a nonsensical thing to do. There would have been nothing that could have been done. So, nonetheless, that was my first introduction into them. So it was May 5th of 2004, and then a year later, they would come back on May 12th of 2005, but I didn't have any interaction for that entire year. Additionally, I had talked to my girlfriend at that time. Her name was Lynette. And so the next day when I told her about that, she didn't believe me whatsoever. So she didn't, she thought that maybe I was losing it. Didn't have anything much to do with me for an entire year, even though we lived together. She actually conspired to have me put into a mental institution with my family, which thank God that didn't go the direction that it was starting to. But what was good about May 12th of 2005 is the fact they came back, and they came back in huge numbers. And then I was able to take people out and show them, including my girlfriend at the time. And then she was like, I'm so sorry. I had no idea that this was actually really happening. And so I started taking video evidence of it. And then as I was doing that, then the military caught on. So the military started figuring out that this was happening, and then they started showing up, and I started filming them too. A lot of that can be found on my YouTube channel as well. Not, I used to have nothing but a UFO channel for a while, but I ended up canceling that out, and I only kept a few of the videos, only kept a few of the helicopter videos. But with that said, they are on the YouTube channel, and it was shortly after that that the UFO hunters got a hold of me, and they ended up seeing some of my footage, which they used in, I believe it was called Dark Presence. Um, and so they used that footage. They wanted to come out and interview me, but at that time, Lynette, the girl that I was with, she was worried with the military constantly circling, and she kept thinking that, one day I just wasn't going to come home. She was like, this has gotten to be out of control. And so she asked me specifically not to have anyone come out to interview me. And so I abided by that request. But nonetheless, that stuff ended up being used by UFO hunters. And that is basically when the whole training thing began. So once I got over the fact that they were there and I was filming them all the time and all my friends were coming out to see them, that was one good thing, is because I got validation. All my friends got to see it. My girlfriend got to see it. Um, my parents got to hear about it. So at that point, everyone was like, oh, well, if it's really happening, then it's really happening. Cool. But that's when it took maybe a year after that. I was right around 31 or 32 years old, I'm thinking. And then that's when this training sort of thing began. And the training was brutal. It first started off in the dream states. Um, and they would do things like put me in these weird simulations. I'll describe one of those simulations for you, but it was a simulation where I would wake up, take a shower, eat my breakfast, go to work, clock into work, go about my day, and then all of a sudden I would wake up again, and then I would start the process all over again. But this kept happening repeatedly to the point where I started getting very worried if I was ever going to get out of this loop. And what ended up happening is I figured out after a period of time, maybe that I just decide to not wake up to go to work, just stay in bed and see what happens. And that fortunately ended up breaking the loop. And then boom, I actually woke up for real. But there was a big problem with that, is because they would do stuff like that often. I would go periods sometimes of 2 weeks to a month with very little to no sleep. Um, Oftentimes I would go at least a week or two with no sleep whatsoever. And some people will say that would kill a person. No, it doesn't kill a person. It drives them crazy, but it does not kill them. There's been people who have gone years without sleep before. So, but it does put your body in a lot of stress. You'll have adrenaline pumping through you. You'll have cortisol pumping through you, and you become very paranoid. You become very, you can't tell the difference between what's real and what isn't. And so I would go these periods of times where I had no idea what was happening or why it was happening. And I had two other friends who were being trained with me. One of them's name was Kevin Huff. The other one was John Tosti. One of them ended up hanging himself, and the other one blew his head off. So the training is ruthless. It's a lot worse than anything the military goes through. I will tell you that. And then they will sometimes come out and physically train you, like do it for real right there. So um, they will start you off with the stuff in your dreams, and they can put you through any simulation they want. They can put you on an operating table and make you feel like you're being literally pulled apart piece by piece, just to see how your brain responds to that type of stimulation, that type of pain. Um, but I figured out after a period of maybe a year, I was like, this feels like training. This doesn't feel like the same malevolence that I thought it was. And then it was amazing that once I came to that conclusion, everything switched up for me. The way the training occurred, the way things were transpiring, and then I started realizing that the stuff that I was being trained to do was applicable right here. And so a lot of the stuff that you see like on YouTube or on Instagram and stuff like that are videos of me training people with psychokinesis or training them with aerokinesis, telekinesis, and stuff like that. Which is basically the universal connection. We all have the ability to do it. Every last single person on the planet is telekinetic, is psychokinetic. It's just a matter of whether you practice it. Because any single person on the planet can also bounce a basketball and shoot it into a goal. It's whether you put in the time and the effort. There's not one person on the planet that's better than another. And so when people call them like superpowers, it's definitely not a superpower. It's where we should be. The stuff that I'm doing now and the stuff that I'm teaching now is where humanity should have been a while ago, but we go through these periods of cycles where elites get in control of things, and when the elites get in control of things, they make the world primarily about fear, hate, war, that sort of thing. So they get us all mixed up. And then they replace our spiritual heritage with religion. And so religion ends up becoming one of those factors that confuses people. And then they become more concerned about their own salvation than their own evolution. And so as long as you can convince people that they need to be saved, they're definitely not going to evolve, because the only thing that they're worried about is not going to hell. So yeah, that's kind of where everything began for me in terms of my training. And once I got extremely good at it, they kind of cut me loose and said, start doing it, start teaching. And so I had to learn how to translate the information that they trained with me or trained me with, and be able to make it nicer for other people to be trained with, because obviously no one is going to hire me to put them on an operating table and make them feel like they're being pulled apart, seam by seam. No, I had to learn how to do it in such a way that it was beneficial and strong for their mentality, as opposed to break them down. And for a while, it felt like I was being broken down. And same thing with my friends, because they ended up, outing themselves because of it.
So I have so many questions, and I think that's also because I primarily do not have any contact with the UFO world, so it's
Sure.
all very much new to me. Um, but some of the questions that are running through my head are, it sounds to me that they were not particularly fearful or against you sharing them or taping them or talking about it, which
No.
I think with my mind of watching movies, that you should be afraid, that it can't do any good, that you would feel very much afraid. Um, So that sounds different than what I would think, coming from a very Hollywood background. And
Hmm.
then it also sounds to me that you mentioned you thought the training was malevolent to you at the
Yes,
beginning, and then
sure
you
did.
shifted your perspective. So it sounds to me that you weren't necessarily on board with being trained, and perhaps you weren't understanding that that was a training.
That's 100% correct. First and foremost, like before that happened to me, before May 5th of 2004 happened to me, I was not a believer in UFOs, nor was I a believer in aliens. I did believe that there may have been life on other planets and other places, right? But I didn't think anything was coming here. So that was a big slap in my face because I thought I knew everything. And we usually always do think that we know everything. But so that was a big process right there, was correcting my own mentality and going, oh yeah, I guess these things are actually real. These aren't a joke. Um, and I definitely was not on board with being trained because first I had to come to the conclusion that these things were even existing. I had to actually overcome that barrier. And then I started thinking that they were demons at first, okay? Because everything that was going on was against my will at that time. And when I say against my will at that time, is because I think that a lot of us forget that we do come into this place either with a job to do, or we have soul contracts that have been set up. And at that time, I could not remember that I had volunteered for the situation. So basically, what ended up happening in 2004 was the fact that I had not advanced to the point where I was supposed to be a proper teacher, and they had to catch me up to speed. And so a deal was made that if I hadn't figured it out by age 30, that something would help me figure it out for me. And so that's basically what ended up happening. But in no way, shape, or form at that particular point did I think that I agreed to anything. And so, as far as I was concerned, what they were doing was evil, and what was going on was against my free will, and that I would never have agreed to something like that before, you know? And it was the same thing with, when I talked to Kevin and when I talked to John, we didn't know. We had no idea. We just thought we were all contactees, you know what I mean? But we had no idea like what the depth of what we were involved in was. And so once it became very apparent, at least on my end, I embraced it. But they had killed themselves before I had that chance to embrace it. So as far as I was concerned, I just lost two friends to these people, and they were doing the same thing to me. So yeah, at first, because your mind, you feel that you're being attacked. It's an onslaught against you. Um, you at that particular point are basically saying you're declaring war against me, and that's the way I felt, was that I was within a war ground, a war field, and that I was. It was like good versus evil, and you know all that nonsense. And at the end of the day, it had nothing to do with that. It was all about evolution and learning and becoming a stronger person. And like I said, once it became apparent that the things that they were teaching me was having effects on my surroundings and stuff like that, that's when I was like, they're training me. They're not hurting me, and they're actually trying to make me stronger. All this pain that I'm going through is actually building me, not breaking me. And so it was at that point that once my perspective shifted, the learning became exponential. It was the learning curve was so quick. It was so quick. And I was able to really fully embody the training and then take that training and start to train other people.
So why do they need to train you and other people? Why do they need to do that?
I've asked the same question a billion times. Why? What would be the purpose and why me? And the only answer I ever get is why not you? It could have been some other dude down the street. It could have been this person or it could have been that person. The way I'm kind of looking at it is if we're all these little lab rats down here, one lab rat is just as good as another. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, if they want to see this place evolve and they want to see human beings evolve, then they need one human being to teach another human being. So if let's say they were to come down here themselves to teach humanity, Well, most of humanity would freak out upon the mere sight of one of them, right? So that's not conducive to their development, or at least the development of the people. If an angel were to come down and do it, right? Then you get the worship thing. So you got people that are going to bow down to an angel rather than get trained by the angel and get the knowledge that they need from the angel, right? So the best thing to do is train one of the lab rats. You know what I mean? He's a lab rat just like them, and we just have one lab rat teach another lab rat. If he can take it, and that was the thing, they were trying to see if I could take it, if I could take the information and take the training, and if I can take it, then he can figure out a way to train the rest of them. And so I don't look at myself as special. I can tell you that right now, any more special or less than anyone else. I just think that I was at the right place at the right time, and they snatched me.
And to be fair, what I think is that you were open to energies. So you were sort of on a spiritual path. You said that you were meditating. So
Yep.
you would have somehow been primed to receive information. And I think it also leads me to believe that you were a very curious person as a child and then growing up as well. So
Yes.
that would sort of fare well with somebody going through those experiences and not being immediately closed off.
Hmm.
Um, and then you also strike me as a very strong person now. So I don't know that you were like this before, but perhaps if they are intelligent beings or much more intelligent than we are, they would be able to sense the strength of somebody or the inner strength and gauge by that, I would think.
Yeah. And they probably, they probably did look at it that way. The one thing that I can say about myself is that I'm highly resilient. If there's going to be anything that I give myself uh, on this planet, is that I'm highly resilient. You can, anything else is questionable, but I've definitely survived a lot of things, and I think that that was one of the attributes that they were looking for. Because the thing is in teaching all this stuff, I get a lot of attacks online. So you have to be resilient just to take the things that people say to you. I've had a lot of death threats. I've had people actually try to kill me. I've been stabbed. I've been shot. I used to be a bar bouncer. I have been in so many fights that I cannot count the numbers, and not a single one of the fights that I was in was a cool thing. So, but I was always able to take whatever was dished out and still come out. I won't say on top. I will say I was always able to come out better for it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And to be fair, what worries me is that it's not the first time that I mean, I speak to a lot of NDEers, and it's not the first time that I hear that they're receiving death threats and people actively taking steps trying to harm them,
Yep.
or in another person's case, trying to harm their pets. And it's just something that for the life of me, I also do not want to think about it, but I cannot possibly understand. I understand not agreeing with somebody or not resonating with their message, but from just saying, listen, this is not for me, I'm not going to watch it, I'm not going to accept that message, to actively, be planning and putting your time, thoughts, and energy into this kind of an action, I do not comprehend it.
Neither do I. I always wondered what is so threatening about being spiritually autonomous to people that they would feel that they need to go out of their way to try to cause harm to others. And most of the threats that I get come from very religious people. Most of the death threats that I get come from Christians or come from, Muslims and whatnot, because they think that what I'm doing is somehow evil. And it's like, no, energy, there's nothing positive or negative with energy. Energy can be used in any way, shape, or form. We all have a bioelectrical field. There is nothing evil about your bioelectrical field that keeps you alive. And so once you learn how to project it, that is when you start to get these results. And that's all there is to it. And so it amazes me that when a person experiences or comes across something that they don't resonate with or like, and their first thought is to attack. I don't understand it myself. And I don't think I ever understand it. I get where they're coming from because they feel threatened, but I don't understand the mentality.
Yeah, no, definitely not. So, because we don't have a lot of alien discussion on the channel here, I want to ask you point blank if, for somebody that has no idea about the conversations happening around the UFO topics, alien topics, if I were to ask you, what are aliens and should I be afraid? Do they want something good for me? Do they want something bad for me? Do I need to be terrified? Am I going to run into somebody on the street that's perhaps an alien? What would be your short answer to sort of explain to me what the situation is to your understanding right now?
From my understanding is number one, if aliens wanted to hurt us, we would be hurt. We would already be done for. Okay. The ones that I've experienced are so far advanced from anything that human beings do that it's ridiculous. So if they really wanted to cause damage, it would have been done. Um, Aliens, quote unquote, they're just beings. They've been here a long time, and mankind's stay on Earth has been relatively small in the grand spectrum of the universe. So the entities that we often call aliens are just nothing more than other biological beings that have been around and have evolved and are at a certain point of their development. So in regards to whether we should be afraid of aliens, no, but we should be wary of government systems that would like to make us think that aliens are malevolent. They like to make us think that aliens are evil or that they're demonic. See, the thing is there's much more benefit for the government to have injected fear into us than, say, the aliens, because the aliens don't profit from our fear. The aliens don't profit from uh, putting movies on with us cutting each other apart, blowing each other into pieces, and or making movies about aliens that are coming down to do the same thing to us. The fact of the matter is, human beings are more of a threat to each other than any other being in the universe. We are more of a threat. I am more in danger of my neighbor coming over here and shooting me with a gun here in the United States than I am of an alien coming down from wherever they come from and putting a ray up my butt. You know what I mean? I'm in far more danger of my next door neighbor than I am anybody else. And my next door neighbor is actually a pretty cool guy. But the fact of the matter is, people snap. And so the one thing that I have learned since doing all this is that I have not found an enemy in any sort of aliens or any sort of beings that are different than a human being. As a matter of fact, even animals are far more prone to being peaceful. I could probably go out to Colorado right now and walk up around and not get attacked by a bear, but I could easily walk downtown Indianapolis and almost get shot by a gangster. So that's the thing. Human beings need to worry more about their own evolution, and by doing so, they would be able to peg what are the dangers around them, what are the most dangerous things that are around them, and they would understand that they have nothing to fear pretty much from anything other than people.
I think that's spot on, right? Because when you were saying that human beings are more harm to each other than anything else could ever be, um, it almost made me want to laugh because I'm thinking of everything going on in the world today, and we're on different continents, but it seems like, when I think of elections, when I think of people being at odds with each other, it's pretty much like we're in the same place. We seem to be at odds with each other about every possible topic. We seem to not be agreeable anymore and open to other points of view and
That's right.
resort to violence whenever somebody has a different opinion.
Yep.
Um, and then again, we have the internet, so it's so possible to, leave hateful comments and
There it is.
just everything, and be a keyboard warrior. So I think this idea that should we be terrified, it sort of comes from the world that we live in, which is
Hmm.
made by humans
That's
and
right.
that we're experiencing, that we're so sort of in that constant fear state of, oh, something else. Well, are they going to harm me or not? Because my experience with humans is that, well, you sort of have to watch out usually.
Yep. Yep.
So, Michael, this has been so interesting for me to dive deeper into the UFO stuff. But I have to say, it was so wonderful to understand more of your training and what you do and what your mission is. And I'm so impressed with the fact that you were able to stay curious throughout the many trials that you've had. I don't think many would have kept that trait. So I think it's absolutely amazing. Now, for anybody that wants to know more about you, about what you do, and you've also mentioned some of the videos that you've posted online, what's the best place they can go to find you?
So we have evolvedministry.org. So it's the name is spelled exactly as stated, Evolved Ministry, not ministries, but evolvedministry.org. You can also find us on Instagram. You can also find us on TikTok and YouTube, although our numbers have, because of whatever algorithm YouTube is doing now, our numbers have dropped dramatically on YouTube, but they have completely blasted through the roof on Instagram. So we're doing very well there. You can come and check that out there, or like I said, just go right to evolveministry.org, and that website will basically navigate you into everything, every single thing that you need to know about what we do will be listed right there on that site. And we offer a lot of training and different forms of training.